There's one place in Saqqara that tourists aren't exactly known for. It's an underground complex carved into the rock, where granite boxes weighing up to 70 tons each stand in stone niches. The official name is the Serapeum. The official explanation is that sacred bulls were buried here. That's where the official part ends and the engineering part begins. Because when you bring a precision measuring instrument to the inside box, something awkward happens. The deviation in plane is less than 2/10,000ths of an inch over the entire length of the piece. That's not the level of an artisan. That's not the level of a master craftsman. That's the tolerance of an industrial computer numerical control milling machine, equipment that appeared in the second half of the 20th century. And we're asked to believe that this result was achieved with copper chisels and abrasive sand. Just turn on a calculator. Copper has a hardness of 3 on the Mohs scale. Granite is between 6 and 7. A copper tool can't work granite by definition. It crumbles on contact, like Play-Doh on concrete. This isn't a matter of opinion. It's first-year physics of materials. And here, the calculator fails. Not because it's broken, but because the input data contradicts one another. The object exists. You can touch it. But the tool supposedly used to create it is physically incapable of performing such work. One of two things. Either the object is a fake, and someone dumped 70 tons of granite into the dungeon as a joke, or the story of its creation is a lie. And here's the important thing. This could be written off as an anomaly, one strange object in one strange basement. But anomalies tend to accumulate. Because if you line up all the megalithic sites of Egypt in a chronological order and look at it honestly, without a textbook in hand, you'll see something that shouldn't be there. The line doesn't go up, as a developing civilization should. It goes down. Consider what I'm about to say. The Great Pyramid of Giza, an object attributed to the very beginning of Egyptian history, is the most precise engineering structure in the entire country, 2,300,000 blocks. Orientation to the cardinal points is within 3 arc minutes. The base is a perfect square with sides of 230 meters, where the difference between the longest and shortest edges is less than 20 centimeters. This is the 4th dynasty, the supposed dawn of civilization. Now fast forward. 5th dynasty, the Pyramid of Unas, loose rubble poured inside a rough stone shell. It began to crumble, even during the lifetime of those who supposedly built it. The 6th dynasty, even worse. The New Kingdom, absolutely mud brick and clay mortar, slapped on top of megalithic foundations that stand without a single binder and have not moved a millimeter over millennia. Place these facts side by side and look at the resulting graph. It's not going up, down. Each successive generation builds worse than the last. Each successive century loses what the previous one possessed. This isn't the curve of a civilization that learns. It's the curve of a civilization that forgets. You're told that Egypt started simple and progressed to complexity. But the stones tell you exactly the opposite. It started with the impossible and slid into the primitive. It's as if someone were showing you a film running backwards and insisting that's exactly how it all happened. That a child first wrote a doctoral dissertation and then forgot how to hold a pencil. There's only one model that fits this data without forcing logic. Someone found a ready-made infrastructure. The first generation still understood how to use it. The second remembered the general principles. The third simply lived inside, not understanding how the walls were constructed. By the 10th generation, all that remained were legends about great ancestors and a complete inability to replicate anything they left behind. And then a question arises that changes everything. If these objects aren't monuments or tombs, if they were inherited from someone who possessed an entirely different level of technology, then what were they really? What were they built for? To answer this, we must stop looking at them with the eyes of a tourist and enter them with the questions of an engineer. Let's start with a fact that, for some reason, never makes it into the headlines of textbooks. Not a single mummy was found in any of the Giza pyramids. Not a single one. Not in the Great Pyramid, not in the Second, not in the Third. When the Arab Caliph Al-Ma'mun dug a passage inside in 1920, he found empty chambers. The granite chamber in the so-called King's Chamber stood open and completely empty. But they keep telling us about a tomb. Fine, let's assume it's a tomb. Then explain its construction. The King's Chamber is made of Aswan granite, a rock with a high quartz content, which has piezoelectric properties. The walls are precisely tailored to their thickness so that the chamber resonates at precisely defined frequencies. Above the chamber are 5 so-called relief chambers, located one above the other with precisely calculated gaps. The official version claims that they relieve the pressure of the massif, but the pressure is relieved by an arch. Every builder of every era has known this. 5 parallel planes with air gaps are not a relief. They are a resonator battery. The Grand Gallery is a room 8.5 meters high, tapering upward with 7 stepped projections. Its acoustic cross-section is calculated with such precision that any sound signal emitted from below is amplified and focused toward the top. This is not a corridor for a funeral procession. It is a waveguide. 2 narrow shafts leading from the chamber to the outside at precisely calculated angles were called ventilation shafts for decades, until it was discovered that they were originally sealed at both ends. Ventilation that does not allow air to pass through is not ventilation. Put it all together. Quartz granite with a piezoelectric effect, resonator battery, acoustic waveguide, sealed directional channels. Individually, each element can be explained by chance, but together they form a system that has utilitarian logic only if the entire structure was designed as a device for working with frequencies and energy. And if this is device, then it wasn't standing alone in the desert, because devices don't work alone. They work in a network. Open a satellite map of Egypt and plot all the major megalithic complexes on it. Giza, Saqqara, Abydos, Dendera, Karnak, Luxor, Ediafu, Philae, Aswan. They line the Nile not haphazardly, but at suspiciously regular intervals, like cell phone towers along a highway. We're told that people simply settled by the water. Of course. But people settled by the water everywhere, and yet megalithic complexes with granite resonance chambers somehow only appeared at these specific points, at these specific distances from each other. Now look at what stands at each of these nodes if you peel back the layer of decorative hieroglyphs added centuries later. The Osirian at Abydos is a structure entirely sunken below the groundwater level. Its walls are made of monolithic granite blocks weighing up to 100 tons each. There's not a single inscription on the supporting structures. All the hieroglyphs appear only on the later brick extensions, slapped on like kiosks around a factory floor. Dendera is a complex whose underground crypts are carved with images that have no connection whatsoever to the famous pantheon. Instead, they bear a frightening resemblance to technical documentation that no one could read. Karnak is a forest of sandstone columns, but the foundation beneath them is granite and basalt, laid using a completely different technology, with different precision, in a different era. Everywhere, the same image. Below is a megalithic core of solid rock, without mortar, without inscriptions, with an engineering precision incompatible with the official chronology. Above is a later decorative shell, brick, plaster, paint, cartouches, as if someone found a server rack, covered it in clay, and painted a floral pattern on top. Remove the pattern, and all that remains is a frame. Granite, quartz, water, geometry. Each node is located above an aquifer. Each contains chambers with acoustic properties. Each is oriented with a precision that requires geodetic equipment. These are not temples. These are not palaces. This is infrastructure, and it doesn't end at the borders of Egypt. Because if you look up and at a world map, you'll find exactly the same nodes on other continents, with exactly the same technology, and with exactly the same layer of foreign paint on top. Peru, 3,600 meters high, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, walls of andesite blocks weighing up to 120 tons, cut into irregular polygons and fitted together so tightly that it's impossible to slip a razor blade between them. No mortar, no cement, not a single fastener, only a geometric fit so precise that the seams look welded. Lebanon, Baalbek. 3 trilithons, stone blocks weighing 800 tons each, raised to a height of 7 meters and laid at the base of a platform with pinpoint precision. A 4th block, 1,200 tons, lies in the quarry nearby, abandoned as if the process had been interrupted mid-operation. India, Hampi, granite columns, each striking a different note when struck, like piano keys carved from stone. Nearby are the ruins of platforms made of megalithic blocks, on which stand late Hindu structures of soft sandstone, like cardboard houses on a concrete foundation. Now stop and think. 4 points, 4 continents. Not a single proven contact between these cultures within the official chronology. And yet the same technology, the same polygonal masonry without mortar, the same traces of processing on the surfaces, which look as if the stone was not cut but softened, the same impossible logistics of moving blocks whose weight precludes any known method of transportation, the same orientation to the cardinal points, accurate to minutes of arc. Official science offers exactly one explanation for this: independent, parallel development. That is, dozens of isolated peoples on different ends of the planet, unaware of each other's existence, accidentally and simultaneously invented identical stone-cutting technology, identical masonry principles, and identical standards of precision. And then, just as simultaneously and synchronously, they lost this technology. That's no explanation. It's a refusal to explain, wrapped in academic garb. The only model that doesn't require 10 impossible coincidences is a single design system, a single engineering code, a single network. It worked on several continents simultaneously, and then it stopped. Not gradually, not from old age. Something shut it down, abruptly, and across the entire planet at once. And the traces of this shutdown don't need to be searched for in the archives. They're etched right into the stone. There are blocks on the Giza Plateau that tour guides avoid. Their surface is covered with a black, glassy crust, smooth, shiny, fused. This isn't paint. It's not soot from torches. It's not the result of weathering. It's vitrification, a process in which the mineral structure of the stone melts and solidifies into glass. Vitrification of granite requires temperatures over 700 degrees Celsius. Steel melts at that temperature. Such temperatures aren't produced by a forest fire, a lightning strike, or a nearby volcanic eruption, which hasn't occurred within 1,000 kilometers of Giza in recorded geological history. And this isn't an isolated incident. Scottish brochs are stone towers whose interior walls have become so vitrified that the rocks from different layers have fused together. Hattusa, the Hittite capital in Anatolia, is a ruin where the brickwork has been transformed into ceramic mass, as if the entire city had been inside an industrial kiln. Ancient forts on the west coast of Ireland present a similar picture. The same thermal event left the same signature in stone at points separated by thousands of kilometers. But that's only the first layer. There's a second, and it's even more inconvenient. All over the world, from Cairo to Omsk, from Rome to Portland, there are buildings whose ground floors have sunk 2, 3, sometimes 4 meters underground. Basement windows were once ground floor windows. Doors, leading into the ground, were once front entrances. The standard explanation is a cultural layer. The city lived and littered, and the ground level gradually rose. But the cultural layer accretes unevenly, more in some places, less in others. And here we see a uniform occurrence at the same depth, in the same horizon, on different continents. This isn't the debris of centuries, this is a single flow. Dirt, ash, sedimentary material, flowing across the planet's surface in a very short time. Put it all together: vitrified stone, floors covered in soil, construction sites abandoned halfway through. These aren't traces of the decline of civilization. Decline is when the lights gradually go out. And here, the lights were turned off with a switch, with one blow. And those who survived this blow found themselves in a world where the infrastructure still stands, but no one can understand how it works. Ramses II reigned for 66 years, and during that time, he placed his cartouche on more sites than any other pharaoh in history has ever come close to. Luxor, signed. Karnak, signed. Abu Simbel, signed. Abydos, signed. Dozens upon dozens of structures throughout the Nile Valley bear his name. It is generally accepted that this is evidence of the power of the greatest of pharaohs. But ask yourself a simple question. If you built a house, would you carve your name on every wall? No. You only do that when the house isn't yours, when you need to stake a claim on someone else's property. Ramses didn't build. Ramses marked. He stamped his user stamp on infrastructure that existed long before he was born. And now, let's move on to the main evidence, the Great Pyramid. The only link linking this object to a specific pharaoh is the cartouche of Khufu, discovered in 1837 by British Colonel Howard Vyse in one of the so-called unloading chambers. Red paint on rough limestone. Graffiti in a technical room, inaccessible without special equipment. Based on this graffiti, the most precise engineering structure on the planet was attributed to one man, and this attribution became axiomatic. But 1837 was an era when forgery of antiquities was not an exception, but an industry. Weiss arrived in Egypt determined to make a great discovery. He was running out of money, and the patience of his sponsors was wearing thin. And suddenly, in a chamber that no one had ever opened before, he finds exactly what he was looking for, the only inscription in the entire pyramid, the one that explains everything. It's like planting a passport at the scene of a crime and declaring the case closed. And all of Egyptology is built on this foundation, on graffiti sprayed in a hard-to-reach chamber, discovered by someone desperate for a sensation. We mistook vandalism for engineering documentation, a user sticker for the manufacturer's signature. And we never once asked the question, if this signature is a fake, then who is the real author? And why didn't they leave a single name? Only a technology we still can't replicate. Conduct a thought experiment. Imagine that tomorrow civilization collapses. 500 years later, survivors find a router in the ruins. They don't know what it is, but they see a symbol on its casing, 3 arcs radiating from a single point. A generation later, this symbol is painted on the walls. 3 generations later, it becomes a symbol of the invisible force that once connected people. 10 generations later, it is a sacred sign of the 3 heavens and a router and altar. Are you kidding? Then look at the Djed pillar. Officially, it's the spine of the god Osiris. 4 horizontal plates on a vertical rod, tapering toward the base. Now open any electrical engineering reference book and find the section on high-voltage insulators. 4 horizontal ribs on a vertical rod, tapering toward the base. A 100% match in shape. But let's say one match means nothing. Then let's go to Dendera, underground crypts, off-limits to tourists. On the walls are reliefs that Egyptologists stubbornly call a lotus with a snake inside. An elongated transparent vessel. Inside is a wavy line running from the base to the flared end. A cable, resting on a Djed pillar, approaches the vessel from below. A figure stands nearby, holding the vessel in both hands. Now place next to it a drawing of a Crookes discharge tube, a device from the late 19th century. A vacuum flask. Inside is a glowing discharge in the form of a serpentine line. Below is a conductor running to a power source through an insulator. The operator holds the flask in his hands. Each element of the relief has a technical correspondence. Each one. Take the Ankh, the key of life. The loop closes at the crosshairs. The vertical line goes down. This is not an abstract symbol. It is a contour diagram of a device with a closed circuit. Now put all these coincidences together in a row. The Djed is an insulator. Dendera is a gas discharge tube. Ankh is an electrical circuit. Each one can be disputed individually. But when there are 10, 20, 50 coincidences, you're no longer dealing with a coincidence. You're dealing with a system. A system in which a technical drawing has been retold so many times that it's become an icon. The generation that saw the device in operation sketched it as best they could. The next copied the drawing. The third added a mythological explanation. The fifth prayed to the image, unaware that it was an instruction manual. The drawing became a prayer. The engineer became a priest. And we read the technical documentation of a lost civilization and see it as a collection of fairy tales. In 1993, German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink did something no one had done before. He launched a miniature robot, Upu-Out 2, into the southern shaft of the Great Pyramid's Queen's Chamber, the very shaft that had been thought for decades to be a ventilation shaft, despite being sealed at both ends. At a depth of 65 meters, the robot encountered a stone door with 2 copper handles. A door with fittings. Inside, a structure that officially contained nothing but empty chambers and bare walls. What happened next is a textbook example of how the system works. Gantenbrink received no award. He was removed from the project. Egyptian authorities closed access to the shaft and kept no one near it for almost 10 years. In 2002, they finally staged a television show. They drilled through the door in front of the chambers and discovered a second door behind it, after which the research was halted again. 2 doors, 0 answers, a complete ban on further exploration. Now, the Sphinx. In 1991, seismologist Thomas Dobecki conducted an acoustic scan of the ground beneath the forepaws. The instruments revealed rectangular voids of regular geometric shapes at a depth of several meters. Not natural caverns, the edges were too smooth. Man-made chambers. The result? Dobecki was suspended. Drilling was banned. Further scanning was blocked. Voids exist. This is a confirmed geophysical fact. But one cannot peer into them. 2017. The International Pyramid Scan Project. muon tomography, the most advanced technology for visualizing internal cavities. The result? A void at least 30 meters long was discovered above the Grand Gallery. A huge chamber, the existence of which no one suspected. Access to it is blocked. Conducting frequency measurements inside the pyramids requires a special permit, which is not issued. Independent acoustic research is prohibited. Ground-penetrating radar scanning of the foundations is prohibited. Do you see a pattern? Every time someone gets too close to the answer, a wall appears between them and it. Not a stone wall, but a bureaucratic one. The door isn't forced open. The chamber isn't examined. The void isn't penetrated. And that's not negligence. Negligence is forgetting. But here, they remember very well. They remember and control every centimeter. They don't hide stones. Stones are too big to hide. They hide access, because a stone without context is just a stone. But a stone, measured at the right frequency with the right instrument, is the answer to a question no one has the right to ask out loud. We now have enough detail to answer the question posed in the title. Why didn't Egypt develop further? The standard version offers a litany of reasons: invasions, droughts, internal conflicts, resource depletion. This all sounds logical if we accept as axiomatic that Egypt itself built what we see. But we've just spent 9 parts demonstrating that this axiom doesn't stand up to the test of a calculator. And if we remove it, the answer becomes entirely different. Egypt didn't develop further because there was nowhere to develop. It didn't climb a ladder. It stood at the top of someone else's ladder and slowly slid down. Each generation lost another rung, not because it was more stupid than the previous one, but because it was using a system it didn't design, didn't understand, and couldn't fix. This isn't a degradation of intelligence. It's a degradation of access. Imagine a crew that inherited a nuclear submarine. The first generation remembers which buttons to press. The second knows the buttons exist, but confuses the sequence. The third is already welding the control room shut and living inside the hull, using the reactor compartment as a storage room. The fifth is telling children the legend of the iron fish created by the gods. The 10th is praying to the rusty hull and bringing it gifts. This is precisely what the chronology of Egypt shows: a resonator chamber, with a frequency of 438 Hertz becomes the Pharaoh's chamber of eternal sleep. An acoustic waveguide with a calculated cross-section is transformed into a ceremonial gallery. Directed sealed channels are declared symbolic paths for the soul. At every step, function is replaced by metaphor. And metaphor is not poetry. It is a diagnosis of a civilization that has lost understanding and filled the void with the only thing left: imagination. Egypt did not stop. It did not stumble. Enemies did not hinder it. It simply spent an inheritance it could not replenish. And when the last engineer with any understanding died without passing on his knowledge, the system went silent forever. But here's the important thing. This didn't just happen in Egypt. The same curve, from perfection to ruin, is visible at every node on every continent, which means it wasn't just local droughts or neighboring raids. It was something else, something global, and it hit everyone at once. Let's gather all the evidence on one table and see what emerges. Vitrification of stone, a process requiring temperatures above 700 degrees Celsius, has been documented on the Giza Plateau, in Scotland, in Anatolia, in Ireland, in South America. Not in one place, on different continents. Buried first floors of buildings, the same depth of 2 to 4 meters, in Cairo, in Rome, in St. Petersburg, in Omsk, in Portland. Not selectively, everywhere. Unfinished objects, abandoned mid-production. A 1,000-ton obelisk in the Aswan quarry, on which the marks of a tool stopped in an instant, are still visible. Unfinished, not damaged, simply abandoned, like a component on a conveyor belt when the power goes out at a factory. Now add another layer to this map. Approximately 800 years ago, an event known as the Younger Dryas occurred on the planet. The average temperature drops by 7 to 10 degrees Celsius in a matter of decades. Stratigraphic layers from this period around the world reveal a thin layer, carbonaceous sediment, nanodiamonds, and microspherules, characteristic of a high-temperature impact on a colossal scale. This is the same signature left by impact events, collisions with cosmic bodies. Mainstream science still debates the causes, but it doesn't have to agree. Just look at the consequences. Up to this point, there are megalithic structures of industrial standard precision on 4 continents. After this, there is clay, adobe, the loss of technology, and civilizations that remember a great past but are unable to reproduce a single element of it. The fault line runs precisely here. This is not a sunset. Sunsets last for generations. They are uneven. They leave transitional forms. And here we see a precipice, a functioning system on one side, ruins and ash on the other. The planet has been hit. The infrastructure suffered critical damage. The power grid stopped responding. Those servicing the nodes died or scattered. And those who survived found themselves like passengers on a plane whose 2 engines shut down at an altitude of 10,000 meters. The plane is still falling, but only downwards, and every kilometer of the fall is another generation whose memory is slightly shorter than the last. Until silence returns, we stand and see the Great Pyramid. Around us are granite walls, precision cut to the nearest millimeter. Above us is a 5-chamber resonator array. Behind us is an acoustic waveguide the height of a 3-story building. Under our feet is a foundation, placed precisely above the intersection of aquifers. Every element of this structure has an engineering purpose. Each performs a function in a system we did not design, did not build, and cannot replicate. And we call it a tomb. We look at the resonator chamber and see a sarcophagus. We look at the waveguide and see a processional corridor. We look at the sealed directional channels and see the path for the soul of the deceased. We hold a jed pillar in our hands, an exact replica of a high-voltage insulator, and see the spine of a dead god. We examine the reliefs of Dendera, a detailed drawing of a gas discharge device, and see a lotus with a snake. We have found a microchip, and we decided it was a labyrinth for meditation. Not because we're stupid, but because we don't have the language for what's before us. We lost it, somewhere between the generation that still knew how to press buttons and ours, which no longer remembers that buttons existed. 12,800 years is enough time to turn an engineer into a priest, an instruction manual into a myth, and an energy node into an object of worship. Egypt didn't stop developing. It never started. Someone else did. The one who cut granite to industrial tolerances, who built according to a single code, from the Andes to the Nile Valley, who launched a planetary network operating on principles we're only just beginning to rediscover. The one whose name has been erased, whose language is lost, whose infrastructure still stands, and we lead tours around it and sell tickets. The lights weren't turned off for us. The understanding was turned off for us. And every time someone brings a measuring device too close to the wall, there's a ban, a commission, a review of access. Because if one day someone understands how it worked, it won't be the history textbook that collapses. It will be the entire structure that supports humanity's self-image, that we are the pinnacle, that before us everything was simpler, that progress only moves forward, but it doesn't. Sometimes it goes backwards, and we are living proof of that. A civilization that sits in someone else's house, stares at the walls, and thinks the patterns on them are the whole point. Meanwhile, somewhere behind a welded door, in a cell where permits are not issued, in a void that cannot be opened, an answer awaits. And the light won't turn on until we stop calling the switch a decorative element